Hi all and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from the Straight. Today we're joined by a special guest, Damon Gabbedy from Belmont Bloodstock. Always great to have Damon on the program. Of course, one of Australia's most respected bloodstock agents. Very experienced. He has particular expertise in the European market. He's the Australasian representative for the French auction house Arcana. And Damon, you spent a little bit of time overseas in the last few weeks. I guess what was your impression of the European market or where things are going in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment?
Afternoon, Bren. Afternoon, Tim. Thank you for those very kind words, and it's very nice to be invited on your podcast. The European market is through the roof at the moment, without putting it mildly. The market is out of control. The yearling sale market was up about 25%, which is sort of illogical considering the prize money they race for over there. They're really running for ribbons. And that then followed through to the weanling market and the mare market. So very, very strong sales in Europe, all over Europe and America, of course, too. And I think that could probably be put down to a few reasons.
What are those reasons, Damon?
Well, in Tattersalls, for example, you had a guy called Amo Racing, who's apparently a Greek shipping magnate, who's come in and basically spent about £25 million. And that really has lifted all the market dramatically. You know, he's taken on Sheikh Mohammed, taken on Coolmore, taken on all the big boys and won. And so that lifts everything. So a lot of breeders got a lot of big rewards. So then they come and reinvest into weanlings and into broodmares. And then also this Amo Racing is standing stallions. So then they're buying mares to support their stallions. So you can nearly put it down to one or two big players. And that probably happens internationally as well, with America, John Stewart and Mike Rapole bidding away, Yulong down here. One big player can have a dramatic effect on the market.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Talk us through those Australian buyers that were active over there. I mean, Yulong obviously have been busy on both hemispheres for a couple of years now, Damon, and they certainly sort of lived up to where they wanted to be and punching at that top end. But talk us through some of the other sort of representatives that were busy over there.
Look, to be perfectly honest, there was probably less Australians in Europe this year than normal, which I think was probably a result of a couple of things. Our dollar's weak. Their market is very strong. And I think breeders here are a little nervous about what's going to happen in our yearling sales next year. But, we had Bruce Wilson's Glen Tree Farm buy a mare in France, and they were in England. First Light Racing were buying some mares. Jonathan Munz's Dean Hawthorne was up there at Tattersalls buying. Bruce Perry from New Zealand was there. And we obviously had some people looking to bid, who didn't attend to the sales. But to be perfectly honest, not that many got a look in. We got outbid a lot due to the strength of their market.
Those that were playing, and we had Will Johnson on, about 3 weeks ago on this podcast, and we talked about America as well. What sort of mares are they looking for in Europe to bring down here? What sort of mares and I guess breeds suit the Australian market and broodmare band?
Well, I think everybody goes looking to add something different to their broodmare band. And I think people quite like to buy a good strength of, broodmare sire and something we can't possibly get down here. But, so that's the aim. But then it was interesting to note in the French sale, Arthur Mitchell, who was there, bought a stakes-winning Zoustar mare. So, and I think he bought it quite well too, because, stakes-winning Zoustars mares down here are very expensive. So up there, the Zoustars probably not as highly regarded as down here, and I think he bought it quite well. So I think buyer breeders generally try to bring a different pedigree, different bloodline into their Australian broodmare band.
This week, the news came through, Damon, that the legendary bloodstock figure and auctioneer Peter Heagney had passed away at age 77. I mean, your reflections on Peter and sort of the impact he made upon the bloodstock industry over the past 30, 40 years. Damon, obviously, when you were coming through as a young guy, he was a sort of ubiquitous figure, wasn't he? And these auctioneers have a great sense of character of the industry.
They are, and Peter Heagney was a genuine one of a kind person, and I was thinking back, I started my days at Goodwood Bloodstock in Perth in the pedigree department, and that's now Magic Millions. And I found an old photo recently of a young Damon and a young Peter when he was selling in Perth, and I would have been in my early 20s. And without giving my age away, that's nearly 40 years ago now. So I've known Peter a very long time, and he's always been somebody that you really look up to. He's been highly respected, of the highest principles and moral standings. He's always been honest, gives you great advice. And I look back over my years of friendship with him, and I'm really grateful. And we had a bit of a lunch club we'd go to. Simon, Vivian, the Campbells, the Heagneys, and myself and my parents, Rowe, would have lunch every Sunday after the Derby Day at the Stoke House. We did that for about 10 years. So we go back a long way. So it was a very, very sad loss. And it's very rare in any industry that I'd struggle to find anyone who had a bad word to say about Peter Heagney, and that's a very rare thing in the world. So he was a wonderful person, a great friend and mentor to many, and a great influence on our industry, and he'll be greatly missed.
Damon, how important are those relationships with, Peter Heagney, a great mentor for obviously yourself, but a lot of different people that have come through the industry through Inglis, and just more generally be able to lean on people with that experience and willing to, I guess, pass on that knowledge as well and point them in the right direction?
Oh, it's vital, because those industry figures can make or break somebody. They can encourage you and strive you to go forward and get better and give you sound advice, or they can, really put you off if you're not handled correctly. And Peter was just a wonderful person who had time for everybody all the time, and you could ask him for advice about anything to do with the thoroughbred industry, and he'd be, and even if it didn't have to do with the thoroughbred industry, he'd be a great sounding board for things too. So those sort of men are vital to the youth of today. So, like I said, he'll be sadly missed.
Damon, we don't get much time to take breath in this industry. We move pretty quickly into 2025. Magic Millions, and this pretty much in the second or first week of January, straight into it. How do you go combining your European commitments and travelling and doing the things that you need to do with things like yearling inspections and stuff? How do you work that out? Have you got a sort of routine and about the best way to sort of get ahead in the game of these things?
Well, look, it's going to Europe for me at this time of the year is fantastic, because I love the winter in Europe, and being able to buy some of these French pedigree mares and attend those sales and see the stallions over there. It's a great advantage. It does put me on the back foot with doing on-farm inspections in the Hunter Valley. It's just very logistically difficult. So I'm from Perth. I'm going back to Perth for Christmas, actually tomorrow or the next day. So I just haven't had time to get up to the Hunter. So I'll be up to the Magic Millions nice and early this year, and inspecting from day one, and getting through it. So, I'll be a bit behind the eight ball, but we'll get through it. It's a great time of the year to do it.
Damon, you've got your finger on the pulse and, all facets of the industry. You just touched on Europe going gangbusters. What do you expect the Australian market to do next year? It was obviously down a little bit this year. What's the appetite like from your clients and more generally?
Look, I think breeders are going into the sales series with caution. I think the strength of the international market is great, and hopefully that might encourage a few more international investors to invest down here, because by comparison, I've always said I think our bloodstock's cheap compared to European and American bloodstock. I think the top end of the market will look after itself and be very strong, because the demand is there. Clearance rates could be a little bit of an issue, because they're seemingly becoming a bit of a great divide. What's wanted is in huge demand, and what's unwanted is very hard to sell. So breeders will have to meet the market with their reserves. But our prize money's still fantastic. There's good appetite out there to get into yearlings and to. But I think if we end up the same as we did last year, I think that'll be a great result.
Damon, thanks so much for your time. Great to have you here with us on Straight Talk to talk through all the update from the bloodstock world, particularly what's going on in Europe. And best of luck for the sales season. It's obviously a very busy time of year for yourself. You don't get much of a chance to take a break, but I'm sure you'll hit the ground running in 2025. There's you talk to every single vendor and they tell you how great the horses are. They seem to be better every year, but that's the way it works. But all the best for 2025.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to all, and keep up the good work, you guys. I love your publication. I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Thanks very much, Damon.
All the best. Thanks, boys.
So we move on to racing now. We've seen data for the Race Australian Fact Book coming out this week. We've also seen the Aushorse Investors Guide. Probably two key pieces of, data for the industry to take a temperature and see where it is, Tim. I find it really interesting just looking at various aspects of it and sort of how to cut it up. We run the numbers this week, which is our weekly column. Looked into state by state the breakdown of things, there's a few little interesting stats that sort of stood out for me from that in that one of them. Well, a couple of things like New South Wales was ahead in a lot of categories. I think 12 of the 19 categories, and that's probably no surprise to anyone who follows Australian racing. But a surprisingly low percentage of trainers, and it's one of those things where you look at and you go, oh, I wonder why that is. Now, there's probably certain factors or whatever else, but I mean, looking through that data and that information, Tim, was there anything that sort of stood out to you which you thought, oh, I wasn't expecting that, or that confirms what I thought, or sort of, I mean, how key are publications like that in terms of informing your sort of understanding of the industry?
Oh, well, they're interesting. Definitely, you sometimes, even though we're engrossed in the industry, you sort of gloss over a lot of these things to actually have the hard facts, even though, the wagering figures weren't in the Racing Australia fact book. But there was a lot of interesting data there, and just number of trainers, the number of tracks. I actually thought Queensland had more race tracks than they do compared to New South Wales. But that's beside the point, I guess. On trainers, you touched on, maybe it doesn't have New South Wales doesn't have as a thriving picnic scene as maybe Victoria, which is have more hobbyist trainers, I guess, that possibly an angle. And I guess the number of horses from the Aushorse Investors Guide, the number of horses earning $1 million and $500,000, quite staggering how many. But I guess on the other side, it shows how many hardly win any prize money at all or win a race, which just proves when you do get a good one, how hard it is to get a good one, and you've really got to celebrate it when you do.
What I found also interesting, there's a little stat there, I'm trying to actually pull it up now, about the percentage of prize money that's sort of paid out in New South Wales, despite the fact that obviously relatively smaller amount of trainers, that the prize money there is significant in New South Wales, and the opportunities there for those trainers that are active are quite significant. So there's a few different bits and pieces I found very interesting about where that was. The other thing is that the average field size in New South Wales is on a bit of a decline, which is probably something they'll look to arrest in the near future, given where things are. And no surprise from a breeding and bloodstock point of view that New South Wales is the dominant breeding presence, given the position of the Hunter Valley. Spoken to Damon before about the importance of the Hunter Valley. The foal crops last year, the percentages around that are sort of all standing up, and we're probably seeing some of the smaller states drop off a little bit or plateau a little bit in that regard. I think you reported last week we're probably expecting our smallest foal crop in 50 years next year. These are the numbers from the foal crop actually in 2023, so we're probably a year out of sync with that. But it certainly sort of points to where the industry is going, which is more focused in key areas, whether that be racing in terms of bigger stables, all those types of things, or whether that be from a breeding perspective, Tim.
Yeah, and which is interesting. I spoke to Lee Curtis last week, who had Bohinia win the Magic Millions 3 and 4-year-old race at Wyong. Very talented filly. I put to him, why haven't you scaled up? And he just doesn't want to. He's happy with 18 horses and can make a living that way. But he's the exception to the rule, I would suggest, where most other trainers are centred with Mick Price, has probably trained 60 to 80 horses and for a long, long time and successfully. Now he's had to go to 100 plus and 120 in opening Sydney stables to compete to get that share of prize money and be in front of owners. I think I might have even said it in a previous episode where Mark Newnham, now in Hong Kong, told me once that unless you're winning races on Saturday, the big owners with the big, able to afford the expensive yearlings and therefore more chance of a better horse, are only generally watching Saturdays because they're busy running companies and businesses and whatever. So it's just a function of a corporatized industry and getting more professional, like rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, indeed. That's sort of the other racing aspects sort of to talk about. Looks like we haven't seen any change in either the VRC board or Racing New South Wales board, albeit one's elected by the members, one's chosen by a racing minister. So, not direct comparison. Makes me think maybe in 2025, we've seen a lot of change at executive level and to a certain extent at board level across PRAs and racing bodies and racing clubs this year. I wonder if 2025, Tim, might be the year of a consolidation where racing sort of has now made the changes it needs to make across the board. And perhaps in 2025, we might see a little bit more stability across the board.
Yeah, well, on the VRC, obviously keeping the board in place. They've appointed Kylie Rogers earlier this year, and she's making changes. And I guess the pressure will be on, the end of this financial year and possibly this time next year after the carnival, what they've been able to achieve, whether they've been able to, I guess, balance the books and stop the bloodletting or financial losses. And so then the pressure will be on the board then if they haven't, been able to arrest that. But at the moment, the members voted to keep the status quo and going forward. And same with Racing New South Wales, which perhaps wasn't a great surprise.
Yeah, exactly right. Moving on to wagering now, and news broke this week, Tim, that Entain will be brought before the federal court by Austrac over allegations that it failed to fulfil its anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism monitoring obligations. Look, for a lot of people, this looks like a whole lot of corporate gobbledygook, to be fair. Like, what does it actually mean, and what of that sort of stuff? At the base level is their ability to monitor transactions from customers and determine where they're coming from. It stems from an inquiry which started well over 2 years ago now, and the charges, well, actually it's not charges, it's actually brought before the federal court, but the outcome of the Austrac action actually has come to fruition now at the end of 2024. We could probably expect that maybe the federal court might hear it any time in 2025 or 2026. So it could be a while before this is resolved. But why it's significant, Tim, and why I'll point this out is, Entain, who runs the Ladbrokes and Ned's brands in Australia, has said itself that the penalty, should things go the way it probably doesn't want it to go, will be material. How much that is, we don't know. But just for a guide, Crown Casino got fined, I think, about $450 million. Different cases and probably not like for like, but the federal court in this matter and this AML and CTF stuff will hand out significant fines for individual breaches and are very much empowered to, punish quite severely. So this could be a significant case if it doesn't go Entain's way, and something that might shape the way we're moving forward. So interesting times. As I said, we're in probably a bit of a state of flux with the wagering industry in Australia, and not just from a turnover advertising point of view. There's all the other aspects, including legal aspects, arriving as well, Tim.
Yeah, Bren, I also, moving on, I read with interest your piece about, I guess, the crypto space and moving into crypto bookmakers and things like that. Where is that at? Where's that? What's occurring there?
Yeah, I guess this came out of a webinar I listened to last week, which was hosted by Waterhouse VC, Tom Waterhouse's venture capital firm, which invests in the wagering industry and has got strong interest in this crypto wagering space. When I talk crypto wagering, some people go, what are you talking about? Crypto wagering, we're talking about a lot of, there's global, primarily casino providers, a lot of them licensed in places like Curacao and the Caribbean. But 3 of the top 5 crypto providers or crypto wagering providers in the world, including Stake.com, are headquartered in Australia, based in Australia, with licensing overseas. So the actual knowledge behind this quite phenomenal growth, and just put it in context, they estimate by 2030 there are about 30% of money gambled in the world will be through these avenues. They are developing extraordinary engagement at a very quick rate with a much younger set of customers than what your traditional or even your corporate bookmakers are getting to. So basically what they're able to do is they cannot offer their services within Australia. In fact, the Australian government officially banned wagering through cryptocurrency in June this year. So at this stage, they can't operate in Australia, which is fine. But I think what we need to understand is how big these guys are, how innovative they are. And I guess racing, in my thoughts, should be spending probably the next few years working out what a future of these type of operators utilizing, whether it be cryptocurrency or some other form or digital currency, how they could be incorporated into the wagering ecosystem in Australia, because it's probably ripe for disruption. That's one aspect. I guess the other aspect is it's going to happen. We're moving to an environment now where the Donald Trump, the soon to be American president, has put forward his great faith in crypto. He's going to build a crypto reserve, which will basically give a lot of I guess a bit more faith in the volatility of that industry and way things are. It's coming and it's happening. And I think, you know, it would not surprise me in 5 years' time that we see this happening. And when you consider that so many of these guys are based in Australia, you know, it's hard to see it not happening. I guess, Tim, I mean, I don't know. I mean, can you see the likes of Stake and Sportsbet.io will end up operating in Australia eventually, given, you know, the rate at which they've grown and given their, I guess, their Australian roots and their ability to, you know, access a local market, which is, you know, while it's mature, there's still an opportunity there for these businesses to operate.
So I think it'd be naive to think they won't either, you know, regulated in a regulated market or, you know, an unregulated market. We only saw earlier this month that, you know, super fund AMP invested $27 million into Bitcoin. So a legitimate, you know, part of our a lot of people's superannuation will have a crypto form of portfolio, I guess. So it's moving into the mainstream, whether the Reserve Bank likes it or not, or understands it or not. You know, as you touched on, 5 or 10 years, I think, you know, a lot of people will be betting not just cash, but, you know, crypto and other forms. You know, it's just, I guess the government has to move with the times and adjust, you know, legislation and regulations that way. A bit like how they had to catch up to the internet bookmakers, you know, that they had ran for 10 or 15 years without too much regulation in the Northern Territory and so forth. I guess the same will happen here, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I guess just to put a top on that, I guess the other thing that was mentioned by Ishan Haq, who's an executive of Shuffle, which is one of these crypto casinos, he sees a natural overlap between the type of people that bet on crypto, the type of people that operate the crypto space, their appetite for risk, and what happens in the racing space. So there's a natural overlap there, which he sees as a possibility moving forward. So I think watch this space. I think probably in the next few years we're going to see significant changes. And yep, I'm with you, Tim. I think the government needs to catch up to it, but I also think racing needs to start planning and thinking about how they can work this out. Now, it may not be, you know, next year, the year after, or whatever else, but 10 years' time, the wagering landscape's changed a lot in the last 10 years, and it'll change a lot more in the next 10 years, that's for sure. All right, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you listen to us, whether it be on Spotify, YouTube, Podbean, Apple. You know, give us a little tick or a little star or whatever else it is. Hopefully you're enjoying what we're talking about. We'll be taking a short break over the Christmas period, but we're coming back with a vengeance, Tim. In the new year, we'll be doing a broadcast every day from the Monday of Magic Millions. We'll do a preview to start with, and then post every sales day. You and I will be having a chat up there on the Gold Coast, bringing in all the people that are involved closely with that sale, and hopefully bring to our audience a real sense of what's going on up there and bring them a daily update. So we hope all our listeners have an enjoyable Christmas and a lovely New Year, and we'll be back in the new year bigger and better than ever on Straight Talk.